And we continue with chapter 33, 7-Year Itch. That's the title I gave my first album on Island, because it'd been 7 years since I'd recorded for a major company. Earlier I'd cut a 2 LP live date, a mix of blues and jazz, at Marla's Memory Lane in LA for a small label with Eddie Cleanhead Vinson, saxist Red Holloway. There we go, sorry about that. And organist Jack McDuff. I loved singing with Cleanhead and the Cats, but I was itching for a bigger record deal. Chris Blackwell, Island's owner, is a big-time music connoisseur and exec. He's king of reggae, the man behind Bob Marley. When he signed me up, he said, "Etta, I want you to sing the music you feel the most." I hired Barry Beckett as producer. Rob Freboni also produced 3 tracks. I knew Barry as a slick keyboardist from Muscle Shoals who'd gotten his producer's chops from Jerry Wexler. Unlike Jerry, though, Barry's a pussycat in the studio, letting me shape my own vocals while he concentrates on the music. Barry's mild-mannered, but when it comes to the tracks, he likes his shit funky. We cut a horn-heavy Stax Volt-sounding soul record with fat charts by Jim Horn and a selection of songs that included choice Otis Redding, I Got the Will, I'll Never Get Tired of Singing Otis, and a ballad I really loved, Damn Your Eyes. The record didn't burn up the charts, but it was solid, nominated for a Grammy, and sold well enough where Chris Blackwell wanted another one. In the back of my mind, I had a secret reason for choosing Barry Beckett. Barry lives and works in Nashville, and Nashville is where Minnesota Fats had been living since 1984. In the 2 weeks it'd take to cut the record, I wanted to be close to the man I believe is my father. I wanted to build up my nerve to where I would actually go over and meet the dude. So while singing in the Nashville studio, I kept thinking of Fats, who was living in the Hermitage Hotel. From people around him, I learned that the hotel let him live there for $12 a day. He was their mascot. He attracted other celebrities. They put a pool table in the lobby so he could show off his trick shots when he came down every afternoon to greet the public. During the day, he'd go to the park and feed the pigeons. At night, he'd dine at the Stockyards, a famous restaurant where the country and western stars liked to hang. I kept hearing how he held court with his stories about playing for royalty all over the world, going on with his theories of business management and personal philosophy. They called him a great showman. I had to meet him. I gathered up my courage. I called the hotel. They put me through. "Minnesota Fats?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Yes," she said in a gruff-sounding Italian street voice. "This is Etta James. Do you know who I am?" "I know. Would you mind if I came over to see you?" "Come on over tomorrow around 2. Tomorrow will be all right." "All right." I could not sleep that night. I was nervous and giddy, my head whirling, my stomach churning, my imagination running wild. Felt like I was going to meet my destiny. When the hours finally passed and I got to the hotel, I walked in the lobby with my heart in my throat. I looked around the plush lobby. There he was, sitting in a great big easy chair, the king of Nashville. I felt him feeling me approach him. It was that mystical. As I walked up on him, he made sure to turn his face. He wanted to give me a side view because that's the angle where I resemble him most. He has those eyes, those serious eyes. "Don't get too close." But I had found my courage, and I wasn't about to back down. I stood my ground, stood right straight in front of him, took a deep breath, swallowed hard, and said his name. Minnesota Fats. Etta James. That's all he said. Etta James. Before giving me a half smile, letting me know it was okay to be there. He had this little old wannabe singer with him, a 4'4" nervous bimbo with hair piled high on her head. But I didn't pay her no mind, and neither did he. I felt like he wanted to hug me. God knows I wanted to hug him, but I was cool. I kept my distance. I was respectful and could feel he was feeling something for me. I know he was, because he invited me up to his room, where he showed me his trophies. Man, there were dozens of trophies, and his pull sticks with diamonds on the back. He gave me glossy photographs of himself as a young man, looking sharp and clean. I asked him if he remembered hanging out with Willie Best in the Queen Elizabeth apartments and the sporting life on Central Avenue in the 30s, and he said that he did. He remembered. He was there. I was on the verge of asking him about Dorothy Hawkins. He knew the question was coming, and before I could ask it, he said, "I don't remember everything. I wish I did, but I don't." When I left, we just shook hands, didn't hug, didn't kiss. He never told me he was my father, and I realized that was because he really didn't know. But looking in his eyes and watching him look in mine, I had no doubts. We were connected. The next story, from page 253, from Rage to Survive, Etta James, written with David Ritz. No F. My post-Olympic surge stayed steady throughout the 80s. I started writing more songs and getting my music into the movies. With Brian Ray, I wrote a song called "The Blues Don't Care," featured in the film Heartbreakers, and appeared with Chuck Berry in Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll. That was a hell of an experience. Keith Richards, who wanted to honor Chuck, was the force behind the film. Taylor Hackford was the director, along with Robert Cray, Linda Ronstadt, Eric Clapton, and Julian Lennon. I was in the concert sequence and got to see Keith and Chuck rip each other apart. It wasn't pretty. Chuck's ego was out of control. He got real competitive. To make Keith look bad, Chuck kept changing musical keys, saying, "Hey man, these are my songs and I'll play them any damn way I please." "Look, Chuck," Keith shot back, "you better get your shit together, because this movie will be here after you're dead and gone." That did it. I was sitting in between them, and when Chuck jumped up, I backed out the way. I expected to see fists a-flying. "Don't you ever say nothing about me dying," Chuck screamed in Keith's ear. To tell you the truth, I respected Keith for hanging tough and not walking. He stayed. I believe, not out of respect for Chuck, but out of love for Chuck's legacy. More film work came my way. I sang "Baby, What You Want Me to Do" in Gregory Hines' Tap, and I wrote something called "So Young, So Bad, So What" for reform school girls, a bad girl movie I could relate to. David Stewart of the Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics asked me to do something for The Rooftops, a film he was scoring. He and I wrote a rocker called Avenue D. Dave produced the hell out of it, and I was sure it hit the top. It didn't, but at least in my memory bank, it's still paying dividends. I dig Dave. I also dug getting calls from ad agencies who wanted to use my old songs in commercials. Plus, MCA had bought the Chess catalog and was cutting new contracts, fair contracts, with the original artists like me. The Chess catalog was being pirated like crazy all over the world, packaged by companies who stole the recordings, and like Leonard himself, never paid royalties. MCA was going after the pirates and actually paying me royalties for the reissues. Money was coming in. I also did a lot of TV, a sound stage for PBS with Dr. John and Alan Toussaint, Blue Alive with Buddy Guy and Junior Wells, a polygram special with Joe Walsh and Albert Collins, and a big HBO show with B.B. King, Albert King, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Billy Ocean, Paul Butterfield, Eric Clapton, Phil Collins, Dr. John, and Shaka Khan. I also made a second record with Barry Beckett. I called it Stickin' to My Guns, 'cause that's just what I was doing, singing straight ahead R&B on Get Funky. Deaf Jeff put on his poetry. My kids were pulling my coat to rap, and I snuck in another Otis Redding song, I've Got Dreams to Remember. My favorite cuts were a slow, killing version of Your Good Thing Is About to End, and Tony Joe White's country ballad, Out of the Rain. Man, that made me want to do a whole country album. On the front of Stickin' to My Guns, I slapped a shot of me in a cowgirl hat, wielding 2 pistols, looking like don't even think of messing with me. On the back cover, my sons were on either side of me, looking like tough bodyguards. Guess I was in a defensive mood. Hell, I'm usually in a defensive mood. By then, Donto had become a fine drummer. He had been taking lessons all along and had joined my band. Sam Etta was doing good in school. Both boys had turned into beautiful young men, living at home with me and artists. Recently, they formed a rap duo called the James Outlaws, and man, they rock the house. I took a cue from the old song and moved to the outskirts of town. Fact is, I kept the fort, but moved out of South Central, down the freeway some 60 miles to Riverside, and a suburban home in the hills. After a life of ripping and running, the burbs didn't bother me. We bought a ranchette with a little land in the back, a swimming pool, room for the dogs to run around, and a pool table in the middle of the house, as if I expected my father to drop by for a quick game. You can sit in the den and watch the sunset on the mountains, turning everything gold, and not worry about a damn thing. It was peaceful, even though Dorothy decided to move out there with me. She rented an apartment a couple of miles away and continued to give me hell. Next story. Recognition was coming my way. After all my Grammy nominations, they invited me to sing at the actual Grammy Award ceremonies for 1986. I hated it. I hate it when Hollywood gets together and I'm thrown in the middle and supposed to slap on a smile and act cool. I want to run and hide. I don't know these people, the agents and publicists and managers, and they don't know me. The place is filled with phonies, so I get fearful and withdrawn and cranky as the devil. The year I performed, I was nominated for the Cleanhead Vinson album, Blues in the Night. I knew I wasn't going to win. I sang with Robert Cray, Albert and B.B. King and Coco Taylor, and can hardly remember being up there. I only did it for the politics, career-wise. It seemed the right thing to do. In the end, I felt like they were paying me a chicken and a watermelon. They gave me $2,000 and a new gown. I went through the same thing with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. After years of talk of how close I was to being inducted, I finally made it in the 90s, and only because Jerry Wexler campaigned so hard for me. I was glad. I felt like I have a place in the history of rock and roll. Honors are nice, but the truth is that I'm of two minds about these things. Part of me is thrilled to be recognized, but another part resents the lily-white institution that sends down its proclamations from on high. They decide who is rock and roll and who isn't. They decide who was important and who wasn't. Man, I grew up with some cats who should have been inducted years ago. Jesse Belvin and Johnny Guitar Watson, to name two. When Johnny Otis got in the year after me, they flew me to New York to introduce him. I was reluctant, but I did it. Because of Johnny, he's a wonderful musician, songwriter, arranger, and discoverer of talent. The ceremonies at the Waldorf were weird. RuPaul, the drag queen who found mainstream success, was the tallest thing there. She looked gorgeous, all made up and decked out in fur. In a funny way, she made me sad. She had me thinking of the secret angels I'd known in my early church life, and the drag queens, Destiny, Miss Dakota, Lady Java, Ramon, who had been good friends of mine. They were super talented ahead of their time, never to receive the recognition they deserved. The Hall of Fame committee put me at a table with some English rockers who, through a mix-up, had taken Johnny's seat. Johnny told me he wouldn't have sat with them anyways, because these boys had screwed him out of a song. So much for love, peace, and harmony at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I felt less conflicted about the NAACP Image Award I won. That was coming from my known people, and I cherished the recognition. I remember bumping into Miles at the ceremony. This was at some swanky theater in LA, and he was with his wife at the time, Cecily Tyson. I was shocked to see Miles' eyes looking so old. He was walking with a cane, but his far-out clothes kept his cool. Cecily loves this bourgeois shit, he said, but I hate it. Got anything to get me high? I ain't getting high, I told him. He nodded like he understood, but he wasn't happy. Last time I saw him was at the Nice Jazz Festival. By then, he'd lost his looks completely. All his life, Miles had that fresh, young edge, but now the edge was gone. We shared a limo. He was silent, except to tell the driver to keep playing Albert Collins blues tapes. That was the music Miles was listening to at the end of his life. And the next and last story for chapter 33 from our book, Raised to Survive, Etta James.